I remember the silence of those Iowa mornings, the way the light slanted through the kitchen window, bathing the worn oak table in gold. For 30 years, those moments were a benediction. Coffee brewed, the newspaper rustled, and Sarah, my wife, would be humming softly as she moved about, preparing for another day of church activities, another day of serving the Lord and our community. I was Pastor Michael Vance, and my life, my faith, my marriage, felt as solid and rooted as the ancient oaks on the church grounds. People in Havenwood, our small town, called me a rock. They said my sermons were like water to a parched soul, that my compassion was boundless. And I believed them, or rather, I believed in the man they saw. My faith wasn't just a profession. It was the very marrow of my bones, the lens through which I viewed the world. And Sarah, my Sarah, was the steadfast companion at my side, a testament to God's grace in my personal life. We were a team, a beacon, a living sermon of what a Christian marriage could be. Or so I thought. Oh, the blindness of a heart steeped in certainty. The exquisite, heartbreaking blindness. Our story began simply enough, like many in a small town. We met at a youth fellowship retreat. I was a young, earnest seminary student, bursting with spiritual zeal. Sarah was radiant, with a smile that promised warmth and understanding, and eyes that seemed to reflect the very light of heaven itself. She volunteered eagerly, spoke of her own deep faith, and listened intently to my youthful sermons, her gaze unwavering. She was everything I believed a godly woman should be: kind, devout, passionate about service. Our courtship was infused with prayer and shared dreams of a life dedicated to ministry. We talked for hours about building a family, a community, a legacy of faith. She fit into my world like a perfectly crafted key into a well-oiled lock. My parents, staunch Methodists themselves, adored her. The church elders saw her as a divine gift, the perfect partner for their new, enthusiastic pastor. Looking back, through the wreckage and the ash, I can see the subtle cracks that I, in my youthful idealism and later, my mature complacency, chose to interpret as charming quirks or simply missed entirely. Sarah always had a flair for organization, a meticulous attention to detail that I admired. She could orchestrate a potluck dinner for 100 people, a Christmas pageant, or a mission trip with effortless grace. But there was always a slight distance in her enthusiasm, a sense of performance, as if she were playing a role rather than simply being. Her passion, I now realize, was for the appearance of piety, the smooth running of the machinery, not necessarily the beating heart of faith beneath it. She rarely spoke of her personal struggles with faith, her doubts, her moments of spiritual dryness. I, a pastor who encouraged vulnerability, attributed it to her quiet strength, her unwavering trust. I saw her as perpetually serene, always capable. I mistook emotional containment for spiritual fortitude. How utterly wrong I was. The first red flag, if I had but known to look for it, was that she never truly let me see her, not beyond the beautiful, capable facade. And I, in my naive goodness, never pushed. I respected her boundaries, or what I believed to be her quiet dignity. The destabilization began subtly, like a slow erosion. About 3 years ago, Sarah became deeply involved with a regional charity, one that focused on disaster relief in rural areas. It was a noble cause, and I was immensely proud. She spoke of the organization's charismatic director, a man named Paul, as a true brother in Christ, a visionary whose passion matched her own. He was based a few hundred miles away, and Sarah began traveling more and more frequently for what she called strategic planning meetings and on-the-ground assessments. At first, I encouraged it. Her passion seemed reignited, her purpose expanded beyond the confines of Havenwood. I saw it as a new season for her, a fulfillment of her call to serve. I'd kiss her goodbye at the kitchen door, watch her load her neatly packed suitcase into our old sedan, and wave until she was out of sight. The house felt emptier when she was gone, certainly, but I filled the void with prayer, sermon preparation, and pastoral visits. I told myself it was good for us, good for her to spread her wings. But the absences grew longer. A weekend trip turned into 4 days, then a week. She'd call, of course, her voice always bright, describing the logistical challenges, the fundraising successes. She'd talk about Paul's brilliant mind, his energy, his unique perspective on regional challenges. It was always Paul this and Paul that. I'd listen, nodding into the phone, sometimes feeling a dull ache in my chest that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was more like a slow draining away of something essential from our shared life. Our evenings, once filled with quiet conversation or reading side by side, became solitary pursuits for me. The Sunday dinners, a tradition we cherished, were often missed. When she was home, things felt different. She was often preoccupied, her eyes distant, her mind clearly elsewhere. She'd claim exhaustion from the demanding travel and the emotional intensity of the charity work, and I, ever the sympathetic listener, would offer to make her tea, rub her feet, give her space. Intimacy, both physical and emotional, became rarer. Our conversations drifted from our life in Havenwood, my church concerns, our shared memories, to her endless recounting of the charity's progress, its challenges, Paul's insights. It was as if our lives had bifurcated, and I was merely a bystander in hers, a supportive figure in the background. There were moments, fleeting but sharp, when I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. Once, after she returned from a particularly long trip, I reached for her hand across the dinner table, just wanting that simple connection. She flinched, almost imperceptibly, then offered a quick, forced smile. "Long day, Michael," she said, pulling her hand back to adjust a napkin. Another time, I found her looking at a framed photo of us from our 25th anniversary, a wistful, almost melancholic expression on her face. When she saw me, her face snapped back to its usual pleasant neutrality. "Just remembering the good old days," she said, a little too quickly. I didn't press. I never pressed. My faith taught me patience, understanding, and above all, trust. To doubt Sarah felt like doubting the very foundations of my own moral code. I rationalized it all away, her busyness, her exhaustion, her burgeoning independence. I told myself I was being selfish, clinging to an old dynamic when she was blossoming into something new. I truly believed I was supporting her spiritual growth, her call to serve. The psychological pressure mounted imperceptibly. My spiritual life, once so vibrant and clear, began to feel foggy. I'd preach about unwavering faith, about the sanctity of marriage, about the importance of family, and a small, insistent voice in my own head would whisper, "Hypocrite." I'd silence it, of course, with another prayer, another verse, another affirmation of Sarah's goodness. But the whisper persisted. I started to feel perpetually tired, even after a full night's sleep. My concentration wavered during sermon preparation. I'd find myself staring blankly at the stained glass window in my study, a profound emptiness coiling in my gut. One evening, after she'd canceled our rare dinner date for yet another urgent conference call with Paul, I finally voiced my concern, albeit gently. "Sarah," I began, my voice soft, "I miss you. I feel like we haven't truly connected in months. Is everything all right? Is the charity work becoming too much?" She turned from the phone, her expression a careful mask of polite weariness. "Michael, I appreciate your concern, but frankly, you don't understand the demands of this kind of work. It's not just potlucks and bake sales, you know. It requires intellectual rigor, strategic thinking. Paul and I are building something significant, something that truly impacts lives on a larger scale well, than our little church here." Her tone was dismissive, almost condescending. The implied comparison hung heavy in the air, a silent judgment on my life's work, on our shared life. "Besides," she continued, "I thought you'd be proud of me, of my contributions. Are you saying you want me to give it up?" I stammered, immediately retreating. "No, no, of course not, darling. I am proud. Truly. I worry about you. About us." She sighed, a theatrical puff of air that deflated my concerns instantly. "There's nothing to worry about, Michael. I'm fine. We're fine. I just need to focus. This is important. More important than my personal comfort, certainly. And I expect you, as my husband and a man of God, to support me in this mission, not to question it with petty insecurities." Her words felt like a cold stone settling in my chest. Petty insecurities. That's what my loneliness, my longing, had been reduced to. I felt foolish, selfish, even ungodly. She had skillfully turned my genuine concern into a flaw in my character, an obstacle to her noble pursuits. It was a familiar pattern now, one I had come to dread. Any questioning of her activities, no matter how gentle, was met with a practiced blend of weariness, mild reproach, and a subtle redirection of blame. She was always the tireless servant, I the demanding husband. I stopped asking. I stopped hoping for explanations. I simply swallowed the bitter pill of her absence and her growing detachment, praying for understanding, for patience, for grace. I started to believe that perhaps I was too provincial, too focused on the small world of Havenwood, too accustomed to a life that, in her new, grander scheme, felt increasing. Insignificant. The breaking point arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet hum of my old desktop computer. It was a Tuesday evening, a cool autumn night. Sarah was, predictably, away on another urgent planning retreat with Paul. I was alone, sorting through a backlog of administrative tasks. My computer was starting to show its age, so I decided it was time for a full system backup. Sarah, never one for tech, used her laptop for all her charity work. She had often complained about its sluggishness, so I offered to back up her hard drive for her, just in case. She had given me a vague nod and a quick, sure, whatever you think best, before rushing out the door. I connected her laptop to my desktop, started the process, and began to organize her files. Most were innocuous: charity budgets, donor lists, press releases. Then I stumbled upon a folder labeled Personal, Do Not Open. My heart gave a strange lurch. Sarah was never one for secrets. Our lives, I believed, were an open book to each other. But I respected her privacy, so I almost closed it. Yet, a flicker of something, a premonition, held my hand. Maybe it was the repeated phrase, do not open, a command more suited for a rebellious teenager than a 55-year-old pastor's wife. I clicked. It asked for a password. Another shock. Sarah never used passwords for anything. My fingers trembled slightly as I tried a few obvious guesses. Our anniversary, her birthday, my birthday. None worked. Then, on a whim, I typed Paul. The folder opened. Inside, I found a maze of subfolders, each one a fresh, sickening blow. There were hundreds, perhaps thousands, of files. At first, it was just documents. Letters. Email exchanges. I opened the first one. It was dated 2 years prior. My breath hitched. It wasn't a professional email. It was effusive, intimate, laced with endearments. Asterisk, my dearest Paul, I can't stop thinking about our time together. You ignite a fire in me I didn't know existed. Michael is so sweet, but so utterly predictable. And his faith, sometimes I just want to scream. Asterisk, the words blurred. My eyes burned. I felt a cold wave wash over me. Then a tremor started in my hands, spreading up my arms, seizing my entire body. I scrolled, faster and faster, opening more files. Explicit video calls. Hours of them. Sarah, my wife, naked, laughing, her voice husky, calling Paul pet names, doing things I never imagined, things she had denied me for years. And the letters. Oh God, the letters. Asterisk, he's such a simple man, my pastor husband. He still believes in all of it. The good, the pure, the holy. It's almost sweet, in a pathetic way. But I need more. I need fire, passion, intellectual stimulation. You give me that, Paul. You make me feel alive again. Our little charade in Havenwood, it's exhausting. The prayers, the hymns, the endless talk of God's plan. It's all a performance, darling. A beautifully staged performance, and I'm one of the lead actresses. But with you, I can finally be myself. The real me. The one who laughs at pieties and craves real experience. Asterisk, the world tilted. The golden light of the Iowa morning, the steadfast oaks, the unwavering faith, the rock Michael Vance, it all shattered into a million glittering, razor-sharp pieces. Performance. Charade. Pathetic. These were the words she used to describe our life, our marriage, my faith. Not just an affair, not just a physical betrayal, but a complete, utter, cynical dismissal of my entire being, my sacred calling, the very core of who I was. The ground fell away beneath my feet. I gasped, a raw, animal sound tearing from my throat. My vision blurred with tears, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen, from the evidence of her depravity, her contempt. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute. It felt like my soul was being ripped from my body. I don't know how long I sat there, the blue light of the screen illuminating my horror. Hours, perhaps. The room grew cold, but I was burning, shivering. My mind replayed every moment, every subtle shift, every dismissed concern. Her flinching hand, her distant gaze, her condescending tone, her endless praise of Paul. It all coalesced into a monstrous, undeniable truth. When Sarah returned 2 days later, I was still in the house, a hollow shell of the man she had left. My eyes were bloodshot, my face gaunt, my spirit broken. She walked in, bright and cheerful, asking about my sermon, about Mrs. Henderson's flu. I simply pointed to her laptop, still open on my desk, the damning file still displayed on the screen. She looked at the screen, then at me. There was no gasp, no look of shock, no shame. Her face remained perfectly composed, a chilling blankness. She walked over, closed the laptop with a soft click, and set it aside. Then she turned to me, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. "Michael," she said, her voice even, almost clinical. "I suppose you finally found out." My voice was a strangled whisper. Performance? A charade? My faith? Our life? It was all a lie. She sighed, a familiar weary sigh that now felt like a dagger. "It wasn't a lie, Michael. It was what was expected. What you expected. What the town expected. But it wasn't me. Not truly. Not anymore. I've found more intellectual stimulation, more genuine connection elsewhere. Paul understands me in a way you never could, never wanted to. Never wanted to." I croaked, the pain so immense it felt like a physical blow. "I loved you, Sarah. I devoted my life to you. To us, to God. I trusted you with everything. And I appreciated it," she said, her eyes flat, devoid of any warmth. "But people change. Needs change. I needed more. You were content with your quiet life, your simple faith. I needed to grow, to explore, to experience. You can't fault me for that, can you? For wanting more than a gilded cage. A gilded cage. Our home. Our shared ministry. My love." Her words twisted the knife, then carved out my heart. It wasn't just betrayal. It was utter contempt for my very essence. She spoke of intellectual stimulation as if my faith, my compassion, my years of spiritual guidance were intellectually inferior, a quaint, unsophisticated pursuit. She had weaponized her intellect, using it to dissect and dismiss everything I held sacred. The woman I had loved, cherished, and prayed with for 3 decades was a stranger, a cold, calculating actress who had perfected her role for my benefit, for the benefit of our adoring congregation. I remember feeling nothing then, a vast, terrifying emptiness. The blood drained from my face, my limbs felt heavy, like lead. I slumped into my armchair, unable to stand, unable to move. The image of her cool, composed face, her indifferent gaze, was seared into my mind. It wasn't anger that consumed me, not yet. It was a profound, cosmic sorrow, a grief so immense it threatened to swallow me whole. My spiritual world, once so robust, so certain, imploded. If Sarah, my closest confidant, my partner in faith, could dismiss it all as a performance, what did that make me? A fool? A deluded idealist? Was my entire life a naive illusion? The days that followed were a blur of unimaginable pain. I barely ate, barely slept. The vibrant colors of our home, the familiar sounds of Havenwood, everything was muted, distorted. I walked through the parsonage like a ghost, the walls echoing with 30 years of shared laughter, whispered prayers, and now, the deafening silence of a broken vow. My mind replayed her words, her face, Paul's face. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cold weight of the bed beside me, and a tremor would start in my chest, blooming into a full-blown panic attack. My breath would come in ragged gasps, my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced I was dying. I couldn't preach. I couldn't pray. The words felt hollow, meaningless. How could I stand before my congregation, preaching about divine love and faithfulness, when my own world had been so cruelly undone? My identity as Pastor Michael Vance, the man of unwavering faith, the rock of the community, crumbled into dust. I knew I couldn't hide it forever. My absence from the pulpit, my haggard appearance, would soon raise questions. I reached out to David, our head elder, a man who had been a friend and confidant for decades. I remember sitting across from him in his living room, the words catching in my throat, hot tears finally streaming down my face as I confessed the unspeakable. David listened, his face etched with concern, his hand clasping mine in silent support. He was heartbroken for me, but his steady presence was a lifeline in my drowning world. He helped me speak to the other elders. It was agonizing, admitting my failure, my vulnerability, the shattering of my pastoral image. But in that raw, exposed honesty, something shifted. A tiny crack of light appeared in the crushing darkness. I wasn't the perfect, unshakable pastor. I was just Michael, a broken man. And in that vulnerability, I found a strange, unexpected freedom. The decision to take a leave of absence was mutual, necessary. The church would get a supply pastor, and I needed to disappear, to mend, to question everything. Sarah, for her part, packed her bags with the same detached efficiency she approached everything else. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't express regret. She simply stated she was leaving Havenwood, and with Paul, to pursue her new path. She left me with a small, almost imperceptible nod, a final, chilling performance of polite disinterest. I retreated to a silent monastery several states away, a place I had visited once for a retreat many years ago. It was a place of stark beauty, of profound quiet, where the rhythm of prayer and work was the only constant. I went there not seeking answers, but simply to exist, to breathe, to face the horrifying void within me. The first weeks were a torment. I wrestled with God, with myself. I raged. I wept. I screamed into the silence of my cell. Why? Why me? Why this? Had my entire life been a fraud? Was my faith a childish delusion, easily dismissed by a woman who craved intellectual stimulation? The questions gnawed at me, raw and relentless. I questioned every sermon I'd ever preached, every comfort I'd ever offered, every belief I'd ever held dear. The foundations were gone. But in the crucible of that despair, something began to shift. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to strip away the layers of expectation, of performance, of what I thought my faith should be. I stopped trying to pray with eloquent words. I simply sat in the chapel, feeling the emptiness, allowing it to be. I started reading not theological texts, but poetry, philosophy, memoirs of struggle and doubt. I walked the monastery grounds for hours, feeling the earth beneath my feet, the wind on my face, noticing the intricate patterns of a spiderweb, the persistence of a tiny wildflower. I realized that my faith had, in some ways, become entwined with my identity as Pastor Michael Vance, with the affirmation of my community, with the stability of my marriage. It had become a carefully constructed edifice, and Sarah, in her destructive act, had brought it crashing down. But beneath the rubble, beneath the broken pieces of my old life, was a deeper, more resilient truth. My faith wasn't about Sarah. It wasn't about the church in Havenwood. It wasn't about being a rock for others. It was about me, Michael, and my own direct, unmediated relationship with the divine. It was about finding God not in lofty sermons, but in the quiet brokenness of my own heart, in the compassionate gaze of a fellow monk, in the raw beauty of creation. It was a faith stripped bare of dogma and performance, a personal spirituality that had been waiting patiently beneath the surface of my public persona. I spent 6 months at that monastery. When I returned to Havenwood, I was not the same man who had left. My hair was a little grayer, the lines on my face a little deeper, but my eyes held a different light, a quieter, more knowing light. I resigned from the pastorate. It was a difficult decision, but a necessary one. I could not return to the pulpit, to the performance, not with the authenticity I now craved. Instead, I decided to become a lay counselor. I went back to school, taking online courses, pouring my newfound understanding of human pain and spiritual resilience into a new calling. I now meet people not in the sanctuary, but in a small, quiet office above the town's general store. I don't offer them platitudes or easy answers. I offer them presence, empathy, and the hard-won wisdom of a man who has walked through the valley of the shadow of death and found a different kind of light. My life is simpler now. I sold the parsonage, moving into a modest cottage on the outskirts of town, with a small garden where I grow my own vegetables. Sarah is a distant echo, a painful memory that no longer has the power to define me. I hear snippets of news sometimes. She's still with Paul, still working for the charity, still seemingly successful. I wish her well, not with resentment, but with a profound sense of detachment. Her choices were hers, her path her own. My path, though forged in heartbreak, is now my own as well, free from the constraints of expectation, of image, of a life lived for others' approval. I have found genuine connection with a few trusted friends, the ones who saw me in my brokenness and loved me still. I practice a quiet, daily spirituality, a personal communion that feels more real, more profound than anything I experienced behind a pulpit. The pain of betrayal lingers, a scar rather than an open wound, a reminder of what I lost, but also of what I gained, myself. The man I am now is not the rock Michael Vance, but simply Michael. Broken, rebuilt, and finally, truly free. The silence in my kitchen mornings is no longer empty. It is filled with a quiet, hard-won peace.